Your phone says you have signal. It's lying. You've been staring at the same two bars for 11 minutes and every text you send just sits there. 3 dots, spinning, going nowhere. The trail behind you looked familiar 20 minutes ago. Now it doesn't. The light is changing in a way that feels personal, like the forest made a decision about you while you weren't paying attention. And then you hear it. Or rather, you stop hearing it. The sound of the creek you've been following for the last hour. Gone. You're not sure when you stopped walking beside it. You're not sure of much right now. But here's what matters. The decisions you make in the next 60 seconds will determine whether this becomes the worst story you ever tell or the last one. This is Yellowstone, 2.2 million acres, the oldest national park on Earth, an average of 100,000 geothermal features, geysers, hot springs, mud pots, fumaroles, scattered through terrain that can go from postcard beautiful to life-threatening in 45 minutes of weather. About 3 to 4 million people visit every year. Most of them walk away with photos and sore feet. A few of them don't walk away at all. The difference almost always isn't luck. It isn't gear. It isn't fitness. It's what happens in their head in the first 30 minutes after something goes wrong. If you've ever wondered how you'd actually handle that, not the fantasy version where you're calm and capable, but the real version, where your hands are shaking and your mouth is dry, stick around, because we're going to walk through it together. Every decision, every instinct, what your brain does to you and what to do instead. This is the story of getting lost in Yellowstone, surviving it, and understanding why the people who make it out aren't the bravest or the strongest. They're just the ones who knew what to do next. You started the day the way most people do, confident. You'd done hikes before. Not serious mountain stuff, but trails, state parks, a weekend in the Smokies 3 years ago that went fine. You have decent boots. You have a water bottle. You have a trail map on your phone that you screenshot before you left the lodge because you'd read somewhere that you should do that. Smart. You thought you were prepared. And compared to half the people on that trailhead parking lot, you probably were. The morning was perfect. That specific kind of perfection that makes the Pacific Northwest jealous. The kind that only happens in the interior West in late summer, when the sky is this exact shade of blue that doesn't quite translate in photographs and the air smells like pine and something faintly sulfuric from the thermal features half a mile to the east. You took that smell in and you loved it. Yellowstone, the real thing. The first 2 hours were exactly what you came for. You saw a bison herd grazing in a meadow about 400 yards off the trail. Close enough that you could hear the sound of grass tearing between their teeth when the wind was right. You saw a pair of ospreys circling above the creek. You stopped at a viewpoint and looked out over a valley and felt the specific, irreplaceable feeling of being somewhere that matters. You ate half a granola bar. You drank some water. You were happy. Then you decided to step off the trail, just for a minute, just to get a better angle on something. A thermal feature you could see steaming through the trees. A small one, close, maybe 100 yards. And you thought, I'll just go look. I'll be right back. There was no sign here, no rope, no fence, just trees and that white column of steam rising slow and steady, and you thought, what's the harm? This is where it begins. Not dramatically, not with a moment of obvious stupidity, just a small, reasonable-seeming decision made by someone who felt safe, and you did feel safe. That's important. The feeling of safety in Yellowstone's backcountry isn't paranoia, it's a design flaw in human psychology. The landscape is so beautiful, so ordered looking from a distance, that it doesn't read as dangerous. The human brain evolved to assess risk through pattern recognition, and Yellowstone, with its meadows and forests and dramatic sky, looks like the patterns it cataloged as safe. It takes something going wrong to override that, and by then you're already past the trail. You saw the thermal feature up close. It was extraordinary. A pool the color of a swimming pool cartoon. This impossible turquoise blue, ringed with orange and yellow microbial mats that looked like someone had painted them there. The water in the center was perfectly still, perfectly clear, and you stood at what felt like a safe distance and stared into it. You didn't know the temperature was around 189 degrees Fahrenheit. You didn't know the thin-looking crust around the edge was exactly that, thin. You knew to stay back. You did stay back. You weren't foolish. You were just there. And then you turned around to go back, and the trail was not where you left it. This sounds dramatic now, but in the moment it didn't register as the problem it was. You walked back the way you came, or what felt like the way you came. And the trees were all the same kind of trees, and the ground was all the same kind of ground. And after 3 minutes of walking, you felt a low, quiet alarm that you immediately talked yourself out of. You just needed to go a bit further. The trail would appear. Trails don't move. You're right. Trails don't move. But people move through trees the way water moves through landscape. Along the path of least resistance, which almost never matches the straight line in your head. Without a reference point, without a visible landmark, without the conscious knowledge of exactly which direction you walked from the trail, you drifted, probably about 15 degrees to the left. In 100 yards, 15 degrees is nothing. In 300 yards, it's everything. 7 minutes after leaving the thermal feature, you had not found the trail. The alarm was louder now. You stopped walking. You stood very still and you listened. And this is the first thing you did exactly right. Stop. That's the word. That single syllable is the most important word in outdoor survival, and it has an acronym attached to it that you may or may not have heard before. STOP. Stop, think, observe, plan. It's the framework that search and rescue professionals across North America teach because it addresses the single biggest killer in wilderness situations: panic movement. When people feel lost, the overwhelming instinct is to move, to do something, to fix the situation with activity. And that instinct kills people, because movement without direction just makes you more lost. Movement burns calories and water you don't have to spare. Movement takes you further from your last known position, which is exactly where rescuers will start looking. You stopped. Good. Now the next thing, and this is harder than it sounds, is to breathe. Seriously, right now in this moment, your adrenal glands have dumped a load of cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream, and your heart rate has probably jumped from 70 beats per minute to somewhere around 110 to 130 in the space of about 90 seconds. Your field of vision has narrowed, your hands are cold, your mouth is dry. You're experiencing a physiological state that evolved to help your ancestors run from predators, and it is exactly wrong for the situation you're in, which requires calm, methodical thinking. So you breathe, 4 counts in, 4 counts out. You do this 3 times. You feel slightly ridiculous. You do not care. The slightly ridiculous breathing exercise is buying your prefrontal cortex time to come back online, and your prefrontal cortex is the only part of your brain that can get you out of this. Now you think, what do you actually know? You know you left the trail and walked roughly toward the steam feature. You know the walk took somewhere around 3 minutes, which at a moderate pace through light brush is roughly 150 to 200 yards. You know the trail runs roughly north to south along the creek. You were heading north when you stepped off it. You know the creek is east of the trail. You can't see it. Can you hear it? You stand very still again. You block out the wind. You listen for the sound of moving water. Water is your landmark. Water is your compass. Water flows downhill. And in Yellowstone's hydrology, that means toward the Yellowstone River system, and that means toward lower ground. And lower ground in most sections of the park means the trail. You think you can hear it, faintly, that direction. You point. You don't move yet. You mark the direction in your head and you cross-check it. Does that feel consistent with where the trail was? Yes, roughly. It feels right. You make a note in your phone, not a text, not a call, just a note. 2:17 p.m. Think I walked NNE from trail. Creek sound coming from ESE. Going to try to reach creek. Good. You've just left yourself a breadcrumb. If you have to stop moving, if it gets dark, if you hurt yourself, if your phone dies, that note gives searchers something to work with. Now, plan. You are going to walk toward the sound of the creek. You are going to walk slowly. You are going to stop every 50 paces and listen again to make sure you're still heading toward it. Because sound in a forest is deceptive. It bounces off trees. It changes with the wind. It lies. You are going to leave small markers as you go. A stick propped against a tree, a pile of 3 stones, a branch broken in a specific direction. Not for anyone else. For you. If you walk 50 paces in the wrong direction, these markers let you retrace your steps to your starting point rather than compounding the error. You also, before you take a single step, take out your phone and try the screenshot map again. The map shows the trail in green. It shows your location as a blue dot, or it did when you had signal. The dot has drifted, but it's still roughly there, within maybe 200 to 300 yards of the trail according to the scale on the map. That's reassuring, actually. You're not deep in the backcountry. You're not in the middle of nowhere. You're 200 to 300 yards from a maintained trail in a national park where people hike this exact path every single day. This is a problem. It is not a catastrophe. You tell yourself this. And the important thing is you believe it because it's true. You start walking. It takes 11 minutes. 11 minutes of slow, deliberate, marker-leaving walking, stopping every 50 steps to recalibrate on the sound of the water, which gets gradually clearer, then louder, and then suddenly the trees thin and there is the creek. 8 feet across, maybe 10, running fast and cold over a bed of volcanic rock. You follow the creek south for 4 minutes, and there is the trail. You stand on the trail and your legs feel hollow, not from exertion, from the adrenaline draining out all at once, leaving this specific kind of exhaustion that people who've never been scared, really scared, sometimes find hard to understand. You sit down right there on the trail. A couple hiking north passes you and asks if you're okay. Yeah, you say, just needed a rest. They nod and keep walking and you watch them go and you think, that's what it felt like. Easy, fine, right up until it wasn't. You're back on the trail. You're safe, but the day isn't over yet. And the thing about Yellowstone is that it rarely gives you just one problem. The park is not malicious. It's not a villain. It's just indifferent in the way that all genuinely large natural spaces are indifferent. operating on timescales and at scales that make human plans irrelevant. You've been out for 3 hours. The afternoon is here. And now, looking west, the sky has changed. The clouds building over the Absaroka Range to the east were there when you started, but they were smaller, further, and the morning light made them look decorative. Now they're moving. They're organized in a way that weather in the American West sometimes organizes itself, vertically, dramatically, with a specific kind of anvil shape at the top of the tallest formation. That means one thing: a thunderstorm. Not a city thunderstorm, not a drizzle and some lightning 2 miles away while you eat lunch indoors. A mountain thunderstorm, which can drop 2 inches of rain in 45 minutes, drop temperatures by 25 degrees in an hour, and produce lightning that, in open terrain and high-altitude meadow, strikes without warning and without preference for who deserves it. You look at the map. You're approximately 2.3 miles from the trailhead. On flat terrain, 2.3 miles is 45 minutes at a comfortable pace. But the trail ahead includes the exposed ridge section you crossed on the way in. You remember it. A 1/4 mile of open rock with the kind of panoramic views that make it a favorite photo stop. That same open rock is now the most dangerous place you could be in the next 90 minutes. And the storm is coming. You do the math. Move fast. Not running, not yet, but moving with real intention, and you might make the ridge crossing before the storm arrives. Or you might not. Alternatively, you could move off the trail now, drop below the ridgeline, find lower ground, and wait it out. Waiting has costs. You use your water. You get cold if the temperature drops before you start moving again. You might be waiting in the wrong place if the storm is worse than it looks, but waiting keeps you off that ridge. Here's the thing that experienced backcountry hikers learn, and most day hikers never know. In the mountains, the humble choice is almost always the right choice. Not the brave choice, not the efficient choice, the humble one. The choice that acknowledges that the mountain is bigger than your schedule, bigger than your plans, bigger than your discomfort about arriving late. You look at that anvil cloud and you choose. You drop off the trail on the west side, below the ridgeline, into the trees, and you wait. The storm hits 18 minutes later. You hear it before you see it. This rushing sound that starts in the canopy and moves toward you like something physical. And then the rain arrives in a wall. Not drops, a wall. In 60 seconds, the visibility drops to maybe 100 feet. The temperature drops 4 degrees in the first minute and keeps going. Lightning hits somewhere behind the ridge. You count. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. 3 miles, then 2 miles, then 1. You're sitting against the leeward side of a large-diameter lodgepole pine, not sheltering directly under it, but beside it, using the trunk as partial rain protection while staying away from the roots. Because lightning travels through roots, and if that tree takes a strike, you do not want to be part of the circuit. This is the thing about Yellowstone that nobody tells you in the brochure. Being here, really being here, not on the boardwalk around Old Faithful, not in the parking lot with the telephoto lens, but actually out in the backcountry when weather moves, is an exercise in fundamental smallness, the scale of what you cannot control. And sitting under those trees with the thunder rolling across the caldera and the rain coming so hard you can barely see the creek, you feel something shift. The fear doesn't go away, but it changes quality. It becomes something more like respect, like the specific feeling you get in the presence of something old and enormous that doesn't know your name. 22 minutes later, the storm is past. Just like that. The rain stops, the sky tears open, and the late afternoon light comes through in shafts that are almost comically beautiful. The kind of light that makes landscape photographers weep and regular people reach for their phones. You stand up. You're wet but not hypothermic. You're cold but not dangerously cold. You're okay. You step back onto the trail, and the ridge crossing, which took you 12 nervous minutes on the way out, takes you 4 on the way back because you're moving with purpose now, with the specific efficient energy of someone who wants to be somewhere warm and dry and safe. You hit the trailhead at 5:48 p.m. Your car is there. The parking lot is nearly empty. Late afternoon, most people have gone in for dinner. You sit in the driver's seat for a minute before you start the engine and you think about the day in its entirety. The thermal feature, the woods, the creek, the storm. You made mistakes. Not catastrophic ones, but you stepped off the trail without telling anyone where you were going. You didn't have a paper map, only a screenshot. You didn't have an emergency whistle or a space blanket or even a basic first aid kit. You were operating on the comfortable edge of prepared, which is where most people are when things go wrong. And here's the thing that matters. The thing worth sitting with before you drive back to the lodge and get a hot shower and eat dinner and tell the story in a way that's already becoming a little bit funny. You made it. And you made it not because you were brave or lucky or extraordinarily capable. You made it because when things went wrong, you stopped moving. You breathed. You thought before you walked. You listened for water. You stayed humble in front of the storm. You made small, careful decisions, one after another, each one slightly better than panic, and those decisions compounded into survival. This is the secret that everyone who works search and rescue in Yellowstone will eventually tell you, usually after a long shift and a cup of bad coffee. The people who don't make it aren't, as a rule, the people who were least experienced. They're the people who, when things went wrong, did not stop. They moved with urgency before they had a plan. They convinced themselves they were closer to safety than they were. They didn't tell anyone where they were going that morning, so no one started looking until it was late, and late in the mountains is a different kind of late. The search history is full of people who were 30 minutes from the trailhead when they made the decision that cost them everything. There are things you should know before you walk into a place like this. Things that exist in the space between what the park brochure tells you and what the search and rescue teams wish you already knew. Number 1. Tell someone your plan. Not a vague plan, a specific one. The name of the trail, the trailhead you're starting from, the time you expect to be back, and the instruction. If I'm not back by X time, call the park emergency line at 307-344-7381. This one thing, this 3-minute conversation before you leave, is the single highest leverage safety decision you can make. It costs nothing. It buys you an enormous cushion. Number 2, carry the 10 essentials. This list has been around since the 1930s and it's earned its longevity. Navigation, a real map, not just a phone. Headlamp, sun protection, first aid, knife, fire starting kit, shelter. A space blanket weighs 3 ounces and takes up less room than a granola bar. Extra food, extra water, or a filtration method. And communication. In Yellowstone, where cell signal is patchy to non-existent in the backcountry, this means a personal locator beacon. You can rent or buy them for around $30 for a day. Press one button and the coordinates of your exact location go to NOAA and then to search and rescue. 3 ounces, the size of a deck of cards. The difference between a story and a statistic. Number 3, learn to read the land before you walk in it. In Yellowstone, this means understanding that the thermal areas are not just scenic. The ground around hot springs can collapse without warning. The crust that looks solid has, in documented cases, been 4 to 6 inches thick over superheated water that would boil your skin in seconds. More than 20 people have died in Yellowstone's thermal features since the park opened. Almost all of them made the same basic error. They trusted their eyes over the signs. They believed that because nothing had happened yet, nothing would. The park has boardwalks for a reason. Use them. Number 4. Understand the weather cycle of the high interior West. In summer, Yellowstone thunderstorms typically build from late morning and peak between early and mid-afternoon. If you start your hike early, you build a natural margin. If you don't start until 11, you are hiking into the storm window. Plan accordingly. Watch the western and northwestern sky. That's where the weather comes from. Learn what an anvil cloud looks like. Learn what the dropping pressure in your ears feels like in the hour before a storm. These are things you can learn in 20 minutes of reading before your trip, and they are worth more than the best rain jacket money can buy. Number 5, and this is the one that sounds simple but is profoundly difficult in practice. Stay on trail. Not mostly, not usually, not unless something really interesting is happening just off it. Always. The maintained trails in Yellowstone exist for 2 reasons. They protect the ecosystem, yes, but they also protect you. They are mapped. They are walked by rangers and other visitors. They lead to known destinations with known distances. The moment you step off one in terrain you don't know, you have traded all of that for your confidence in your own navigation, which without training and practice is much weaker than you think. In a forest of similar-looking trees with no visible landmarks, human beings default to walking in a slow leftward curve. This is documented. It's a function of the fact that most people are right-handed and their right leg is very slightly stronger. You walk in a curve. You think you're walking straight. You were wrong about where the trail was. You will be wrong about this too. The search and rescue teams at Yellowstone are extraordinary. They are rangers and volunteers who know the terrain the way you know your own neighborhood. And they are skilled and dedicated, and they will find you if you give them enough time. But the park covers 3,472 square miles of some of the most complex terrain in North America, and finding someone who is not where they said they'd be, who didn't tell anyone when to start looking, who left no markers and has no device, that search can take days, and days is too long. Days in the backcountry, especially after a summer storm, especially at altitude, especially without shelter and fire knowledge, is often too long. This is not a message of fear. This is not meant to keep you away from Yellowstone. God, please go to Yellowstone. It is one of the most extraordinary places on Earth, and it deserves to be walked and witnessed and carried with you for the rest of your life. The bison herd in the Hayden Valley, the prismatic spring at sunrise when the steam catches the light, the wolf pack in the Lamar Valley if you're lucky enough and patient enough to see it, the sounds the geysers make. Not just the eruptions, but the deep organic gurgling and hissing that continues between them like the earth breathing. Go. Absolutely go. Just go knowing what you're walking into. Go knowing that the same forces that made this place extraordinary also made it genuinely dangerous. And the gap between those two things, the beauty and the danger, is crossed in a single step off a boardwalk. Go knowing that the park's indifference is not hostility, it's just scale. The caldera you're walking on is 45 miles by 30 miles. It has erupted 3 times in geologic history. 2.1 million years ago, 1.3 million years ago, 640,000 years ago, each time with an explosive force that reshaped the continent. The hydrothermal system beneath your feet is the surface expression of a heat engine that has been running for millions of years and will be running millions of years after you, and everything you've ever known is gone. In that context, you are extraordinarily small, and your smallness, if you hold it without terror, if you let it settle into something more like wonder, is part of what makes being there so irreplaceable. You are the latest in a long line of people who stood in this place and felt exactly that, the specific awe of something that does not need you, that does not know you're here, that has no opinion about your survival whatsoever, and is astonishing anyway. Every hiker who ever came back from a close call in that park came back with this. The fear was real, the danger was real, but the place was real too, in a way that most of us rarely encounter. And that reality, that contact with something so much larger than the daily shape of your life, is the thing you carry out with you when you finally reach the trailhead, when you sit in your car in the quiet afternoon and let your hands stop shaking and think, I was there, I stayed, I found my way back. There's a ranger at Yellowstone. She's been there for 19 years. She's walked more of that park's backcountry than most people will walk in a lifetime. And she says something that stuck with me. She says the park doesn't want you to be afraid of it. Fear makes people stupid. Fear makes them run when they should stop, hide when they should signal, move when they should stay. What the park wants, if you can extend it, that anthropomorphic grace, is for you to be humble. Humble enough to know what you don't know. Humble enough to carry 3 extra ounces of emergency shelter and admit you might need it. Humble enough to stop when the trees all look the same and the trails disappeared, and breathe and think and listen for the sound of water. The people who come back from the wilderness, not just from Yellowstone, from everywhere. The ones who've been genuinely lost, genuinely endangered, and found their way out, almost universally describe the same internal turning point. The moment when fear became something else. Not courage exactly, not bravado, something quieter. A decision to be very, very deliberate. A decision to think like water, to find the lowest energy path back to safety, to stop fighting the environment and start reading it, to trust the information that's already there. The sound of the creek, the angle of the afternoon light, the way the wind moves, rather than the panicking voice insisting you should be doing more, moving faster, fixing this right now. You found the trail. You waited out the storm. You made it back to the car. And somewhere in Yellowstone tonight, there is someone else who stepped off the trail to get a better look at something. Maybe they stopped immediately. Maybe they're still walking, still telling themselves the trail must be just through these trees, still listening to the voice that says keep moving, you're almost there. And maybe, if they read something like this, if they heard it somewhere in the back of their mind, they'll stop, they'll breathe, they'll listen for water. That's how it works, when it works. Stop, think, observe, plan. Tell someone where you're going, carry the 10 essentials, stay on the trail, respect the thermal features, watch the western sky, and carry with you always the knowledge that the mountain does not know your name. And go anyway, because a place that can humble you that completely is a place worth knowing.